War Stories is an RPG by the aptly named G.I. Garcia of Firelock Games. They make the well-received miniature game Blood and Plunder, which I'm actually a fan of. War Stories is set in the Western Front of World War II, and this is a genre not very well covered in the RPG market. One of the only other games along these lines that I remember is Behind Enemy Lines from FASA in 1982, which included a prolific Jordan Weissman of HeroClix fame as one of its designers. I think there's some reasons for this. After all, the TT RPG hobby is one where its greatest selling point is the freedom to do whatever you want. Now, obviously, when you're playing as a soldier, your primary responsibility is to follow an order given to you from your superior officers. Freedom of action is always going to be somewhat restricted, even if it is assumed you have a little bit of leeway in how to get the job done. War Stories uses the Year Zero engine from Free League as its base. You might think that means that the game is simple, but not so fast, Mitt Flopper. There might be more to the story. Now, as mentioned earlier, this game is set in the Western Front of World War II. Think France, post-D-Day, and into the Reich later on. Let me say some of the things I really like about this game. It does not try to rewrite history. Women characters are, of course, allowed, but not as frontline soldiers. They can be partisans, part of La Resistance, or as special correspondents. I think they handled the tricky nature of racial relations in a good way. While acknowledging that there was strict segregation at that time, they encouraged the GM not to dwell on the unfairness of that particular aspect, and instead focus on the heroic deeds of those units. I think this was the perfect way to approach it. I mean, after all, what kind of people would want to revisit segregation these days? There's two ways to make your character for this game. There's the archetype option, which gives you a pre-made kit to build your character around. Now, this is going to be familiar to any experienced player. But for those seeking a deeper immersion, there's the life path method. This is kind of a mini version of the famous Traveler character creation process. Here you'll choose whether your GI was a blue-collar laborer, professional, academic, or something else before he enlisted. For long-term campaigns, this is probably the way to go. And because we're using the Year Zero engine, that means we're using lots of die sixes for a dice pool. You have 5 basic attributes: strength, agility, intelligence, empathy, and endurance. These are given a value of 1 to 5, with 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest in human capacity. There's also skills that piggyback onto these attributes, including calisthenics for the all-important grenade throw, close combat, heavy weapons, infiltrate, and range combat, to name a few. These are also rated from 1 to 5, and when combined with the base attribute associated with the skill, they form your die 6 dice pool. And of course, when you roll your dice pool, you're looking for 6s in order to succeed. Extra 6s can be used to do things like increase the damage or generate a lucky strike. Lucky strikes, named after the popular cigarette, I kind of like that, are future bennies that your character can keep or loan out with a maximum of 2. After all, nobody's really that lucky in war, right? They allow you to do things like adding a few dice to your pool, re-roll a damage roll, gain an action to dodge out of the way of an incoming attack, and many more. Now, if you fail a roll, you can push your luck and roll again, but for a price. For one, if you roll any 1s in your initial roll, you can't re-roll any of those. Those are now activated, and they generate a foo bar for the GM. That's his version of a lucky strike, and he can use those to torment the characters later on. Rounding out the character creation process are specializations and talents, which will add or subtract dice from your pool, as well as virtues and flaws for role-playing cues. Combat, like just about every other RPG, is the heart of this game, and especially one where combat is pretty much the whole point. And here I give, let's say, mixed marks. I found the system at its core workable, but with some really heavy, and at times needlessly so, mechanics thrown onto it. The initiative is done by card draw, a number from 1 to 10, very similar to the Dragonbane game from Free League. There are fast actions, slow actions, and a couple of free actions your character can perform each round. Movement is a perfect example of a little bit of the needless complexity. You can spend a fast action moving 10 meters, then a slow action moving 20 if you want to forego attacking. We're all used to that mechanic. But then you can choose to sprint after a slow action by making a calisthenics test, with each success allowing you to move an extra 2 meters. This to me is just going to bog down a game a little bit. I expect these mechanics in a miniatures war game, like Bolt Action, but not RPGs that are supposed to be a little bit different. I'm not saying it should be theater of the mind all the time, far from it. But making rolls and doing math just to move a few extra squares is really unnecessary in my book. If you succeed at your ranged or close combat attack, and the rules on those are straightforward enough, you're going to roll some damage. And here's another instance of something that just didn't quite sit right with me. You roll a flat die 10 for damage, for everything. But you aren't really rolling the damage. You're rolling on a chart to generate the damage, from 0 all the way up to 4 points. Secondary charts like this just drive me crazy, because it means you're almost always referring to a table for an extremely ubiquitous roll. You're always going to be rolling damage and always going to be referring to this stupid chart. That's an instance of design I just don't like, period. If you generate 3 points of damage after consulting the chart, you suffer a critical hit, which is like an actual injury. Anything below that is just kind of superficial damage. And when you do get a critical hit on you or impose it on someone else, you roll on the critical hit charts just to see how severe it was. Now you can always use lucky strikes here to help your cause as well. There's also 12 different conditions you can suffer, from gashed to exhausted to disheartened. You even need to make a roll to carry out something as simple as a coup de grace. There's separate rules for falling, fire, hunger, poisoning, sleep deprivation, cold, and more. Now, I don't have a problem with those odd rules because they're usually instances that you can look up quickly and they're not going to happen all the time. But the way they do like light and heavy cover in this game, it seems like it could get a little bit tedious. At some point, you have to ask yourself, if you want to play a war game like Bolt Action or Chain of Command, or an RPG where you're just a simple soldier along with his squad mates trying to get through as best you can. I think this game got caught in the middle a little bit and didn't know which way to go. I think they thought if they were too rules light, they'd make a lot of the World War II grognards mad. So they included a lot of rules that I think could have been streamlined in a lot of cases. Or at the very least, they should have made them optional. There's even rules to simulate the outcome of an entire battle here. Now, I don't think all is lost in this game. They do give a few different levels of grittiness, from deadly to normal to Hollywood. And I have to say, I might be apt to use the Hollywood setting here, where the characters are a little more survivable and the Germans go down a little bit easier. Something like Kelly's Heroes or Where Eagles Dare. If I'm playing this, I'm stripping down some of these more complex rules. The entire vehicle chapter can be broken down to: you need to hit that German tank in the rear with the bazooka to knock it out, or at least in the treads to stop it. That's it. Again, if I want 90-degree angle arcs and armor penetration values, quite frankly, I just want to play a war game. Goodbye to the damage roll of die 10 and consulting that chart every time. I may just do a die 3. No more unnecessary light or heavy cover rolls if the PCs are taking shelter. If the enemy is relentlessly shooting at them, as a GM, I'm just going to say, bits of the wooden fence are splintering away around you. If you stay in a few minutes, you won't have any cover. Suppressing fire? Just tell me you're doing it, and I'm going to assume you do it. If you're subject to it and disregard it, I'm going to attack you a couple of times, and you're probably going to be hit. Now, the game itself is very well made. The book has some good, unified artwork. It is a little bit inspiring. I love that they feature heroes like Brigadier General Teddy Roosevelt Jr., who came onto Utah Beach with his soldiers to inspire them from the front. I got the release bundle, which came with dice, cards, and a campaign book. All of that is top-notch. And I really do like Firelock games. I just wish I wouldn't have to strip away so much to make the game workable. Overall, I can recommend this, but probably only to experienced DMs who aren't afraid to make a few streamlining cuts to the game. I really do think if you run the rules as presented, like in a major battle with a lot going on, there's just going to be less fast and furious action and just more looking stuff up in the book and slowing things down to a crawl. I'm still probably going to give it a shot my way, probably doing a Hollywood movie style game. There is the core of a good game here, but you need to do a little work to reach it. Well, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this overview of War Stories. We try to do a little variety of content on the channel, as many of you know. A reminder that every Wednesday at 7 p.m. is The Lair, our weekly live stream. We have a very lively chat, always have a pretty good turnout, so we hope to see you guys there and join in the festivities. All right, so that's going to do it for today. I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day, and until we see each other again, goodbye.
What qualifies you to be a U.S. Senator? You have 60 seconds.
Hi, good night, everybody.
Hello there. I want to take a few moments to thank our sponsors who are providing you guys a very special discount just for being a fan of this channel. All the sites and discount codes, just for you, can be found in the description of this video. Our old friends from Neckbeardia offer a great variety of products, from awesome miniatures to supplementary RPG material, and even their own RPG rule sets. You just never know what new thing James is going to be cooking up over there, so make sure to bookmark their site and check back often. Crud Forge makes two great games that aren't afraid to poke a little fun at the people who, quite frankly, need a little fun poked at them. First is the quick and hilarious Virtue Signal, the game where you play a social justice warrior trying to attract followers to your cause before the other players can tear you down. Then there's the mammoth Portland Occupied Zone, or POZ. In this strategy game, you play as a complete disaster of a human being, trying to reshape Portland into a slacker Marxist utopia. Bring a few friends and warm up that throwing arm for some Molotov cocktails. Folks at Power Up Paradise are taking care of you with both a protective phone case and, when you flip it over, an ingenious Game Boy, which is built right into it. Go back to the golden age of video gaming and play dozens of challenging games that will delight and frustrate you in a good way. Mobile games are almost universally terrible, so why not take a step back when they did it right?